Hello, welcome to Scary Stories Part 1 for a rainy night. And before we begin, you might be wondering, why am I looking at a boat as the background to this video? Well, that's not just any boat. That's actually the Orca 2, one of the boats used in the original filming of Jaws. Now, before we start the stories, I really just want to talk about this photo. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this before, but Jaws is actually my favorite movie. And recently, I was just looking through some old photos behind the scenes and things that happened to the boats, the shark, and I came across this boat. And like I said, this is the Orca 2. This was actually the boat that was used to sink at the end of the film after Jaws jumps out of the water and lands on the back of the boat. The boat that you see in that scene is the boat that you're looking at in this picture. So, from what I could find, I learned that after filming Jaws, before it had a massive mega box office success, this boat, the Orca 2, was sold for only $1 to a local in Manmia in Martha's Vineyard. They decided to put the boat on their private beach. And of course, after the film came out and was wildly, unbelievably successful, people made a point to trespass on this property and start stripping this boat apart. The photo that you're looking at, I believe, was taken sometime in the 80s, maybe in the 90s. I can't really find a definitive answer on that. But regardless, it's just kind of eerie and sad to me to look at this photo knowing that fans of the film trespassed on this property and just picked this boat apart until there was nothing left. Well, almost nothing left. Actually, in 2023, I actually went to Martha's Vineyard with my brother, and we stood on the other side of the beach and saw what remained of this boat. Really, all that was left was a few pieces of steel and wood, but it was still very, very cool to see. I hope you enjoy the background. I think it's a really cool photo and I hope you enjoy it just as much as I do. And last thing before we begin, I just want to let you know that I am aware that ads were placed all over my videos. That was due to a YouTube update that came out in March and it was out of my control. Moving forward, I am doing my best to keep the ads to a minimum, just as I always have. If you like this video and you want to subscribe to support the channel and also be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and hit subscribe. And please do me a favor and hit that old like button. Really helps out the channel a lot. I really hope you enjoy and thank you so much for being here. Now, let's begin. Spending a week at the bottom of the ocean is pretty much as crazy as it sounds. You get into a tin can with a couple other people and they lower you into the ocean. You sink to the sea floor and live in the airspace at the top of the can for a week. There's not a lot of space when you're breathing fresh air down there. So, the only reason to go is if you live to scuba. That's all there is to do down there. Normally, you get an hour of dive time for each tank of oxygen you're carrying. So, every hour you have to go back up to the surface from the bottom of the ocean, which takes time. When you're living down there, it's different. Your dive time becomes limited only by your endurance. We set up fast refill stations and use high-powered hoses to refill our tanks with oxygen. That way, you can stay in the water as long as you want. Hours fly by while you're down there, and you can never get bored. It's a whole different planet on the sea floor, and who wouldn't want to spend all day staring at aliens? Fish of countless varieties swim past in all the colors of the rainbow. Sea turtles and octopus, dolphins and manta rays, sharks and whales. You'll see it all, not to mention the unparalleled beauty of the coral reefs themselves and all the plethora of life forms that dwell symbiotically within it. The only thing I didn't like was nighttime at the bottom of the ocean. You would look out from the habitat into utter blackness, darker than anything you've ever seen. And how can you not imagine what's out there? We had seen sharks, giant octopus, and barracudas swimming nearby. There's also everything else your imagination can come up with. Everything you've seen on movies and TV that isn't even real. Amphibious humanoids who look like Swamp Thing who creep up silently from the kelp and grab your arm with their hands dotted with suckers like the tentacles of an octopus. Giant kraken and massive dinosaur sharks left over from the Jurassic period and all other manners of nightmares could be out in that darkness. If you spent a week down there, you would begin to realize, 2. Just how ignorant we are of the world that exists in tandem with ours. You try to avoid these thoughts when you're out of the habitat at night. You have to leave the habitat to go to the bathroom, so there's no avoiding it if you need to go. Number 2. One night, I was awoken by a rumbling in my stomach around 3 a.m. It was dark inside the tin can we called home. Silent except for the sound of water splashing up against the inside of the hab. My stomach lurched again, this time more urgently. I realized I would need to go outside. I put my mask on but didn't take my regulator or oxygen since the little hut we used as a toilet wasn't far away, maybe 20 feet. I could easily hold my breath for that long. The light from the hut gleamed ahead of me as I dove down into the darkness. My mind was still foggy with sleep. The dim bulb of the outhouse was the only other light in this universe, so I went to it with urgency for more than one reason. When I got there, I popped up into the little air bubble inside and pulled down my trunks. I had made it just in time. Pretty soon, fish were coming by for their morning meal, and I swatted at them with my hand, trying to pinch it off before they could burrow their little faces further into my ass crack. Fish just love to eat anything. As if that wasn't nightmare enough, there was that blackness all around, except for the light of the outhouse and the one from the habitat. The darkness stretched out forever and was infinite in its mystery. I wondered how far away the nearest great white shark was and if they would be attracted to the scent of all the smaller fish. I shook my head and tried to think of anything else. It was completely silent except for my breathing and the sound of water splashing gently against the inside of the hut. I finally pulled up my trunks, slapping a fish with my hand as I did so, and waited for a minute for the air to clear, so to speak. No sense rushing the dive back into the blackness, I thought, especially considering what I had just polluted it with. After a minute, I took a breath and popped back into the water from the air bubble. I swam towards the light of the habitat. When I was not even halfway there, both lights flickered and went out. I was immediately disoriented. My foggy mind had just been asleep a few minutes ago, and I wished I had taken longer to wake up before venturing out alone. I hadn't even woken anyone else up to tell them I was going. The after image of the glow from the habitat still danced in my vision, so I followed it, my heart beating fast and heavy in my chest. I felt terrified and hoped I was heading in the right direction. I followed my instincts and training and tried to ignore the part of my brain that told me I might not be going the right way. I felt something large brush against my hand and recoiled in shock. What the hell was that? I wondered. I was suddenly picturing a giant hammerhead right in front of me instead of the habitat. My panic intensified. My vision was starting to go a bit red around the edges, and I wondered how much time I had wasted. It was a good thing I could hold my breath for a long time. I tried to swim in the direction of the habitat, but I suddenly wasn't sure which way it was anymore. The thing that had brushed against my hand had felt large, and it had scared me more than a bit. Kicking with my flippers, I began swimming in a direction I thought was right. My hand brushed up against it again. Whatever it was, this time it was on the other side of me. I tried to ignore my fear and kept kicking my legs. My vision was beginning to flood with redness and I was really starting to feel true dread and fear bloom inside me as I had never felt before. Every part of me was screaming for air. I tried to calm my mind and remember my training. My hand grabbed onto something and in my confused and oxygen-deprived state, I mistook it for a power line. Running to the outhouse, I began to pull myself along the misshapen tube. It seemed to squirm and within my grip, but I continued along nonetheless, hoping it would lead me back to the habitat. As I got closer, I felt more of the weird organically shaped tubes. They felt lumpy and had spikes and divots here and there. I realized with disgust that they were definitely not oxygen or electrical lines. They seemed to stick to my hands when I grabbed onto them, not wanting to let go. I had to pry my hand off the last time and decided to stop touching them altogether. Just as I was about to lose all hope, my left hand brushed up against the hard metallic edge of the habitat. I realized with a wave of horrified relief I had almost swam right past it and out into the open water. I felt the shape of it and managed to correct my path. I popped my head up into the habitat and gasped for air, panting and coughing up water from my lungs. I climbed out of the water and managed to find the ladder leading up to my bunk. I almost died out there just now, I yelled and was surprised when no one woke up to ask if I was okay. I felt new fear well up inside me, thinking of all the tangled organisms that had been all over the outside of the habitat. What the hell were those things? And why wasn't anyone talking or waking up inside the hab? I rummaged through my things and pulled out my flashlight, wishing I had brought it with me earlier. How stupid. If I had died, I would have deserved it. I turned the light on and screamed. There was no rational explanation for what I saw inside the habitat. The other two members of my crew were surrounded by what appeared to be misshapen tentacles. But no, that's not quite right. Not tentacles. These were different. The long tubular shapes that came up out of the water reminded me of a recent article about a siphonophore that had been discovered off the coast of Australia. It was now recorded as the longest creature ever seen by man. It was really a collection of zoids that came together and cloned itself thousands upon thousands of times to create an infinitely long silly string that could stretch for hundreds of meters. The crew had called it akin to an underwater galaxy, and pictures of the siphonophore looked otherworldly. It went on forever, a twisting, spiraling organism that faded off into the distant ocean with no end in sight. This was like that, only much worse. This siphonophore appeared to have mutated, and it had picked up some new abilities never seen before. In all my research, the thing had absorbed other marine life. Somehow, I saw barracuda with sharp teeth, small sharks, and eels, their eyes wide and terrified, opening and closing their mouths. They were covered with a thin membrane, and appeared to have been attached to the thing against their will. They were now prisoners of it, being dragged along by the massive ropey sea creature. My crew had the tentacle things all around them, choking them at their necks and wrapped around their bodies and arms. The white flesh of the thing was spreading across them quickly, wrapping them up in its slimy sheath. My crewmate, Mike, tried to scream, but his voice was muffled as I saw a vine of siphonophore crawl down his throat, planting little roots as it went. I was terrified, hyperventilating. I ducked back into the furthest corner of my bunk and watched in horror as the thing consumed my crewmates rapidly and attached itself to them. I watched as it pulled them under and dragged them down into the ocean, their eyes still wide and afraid. Would it filter the ocean water through its gills so they could live down there? I wondered. Would it provide oxygen to the new members of the colony, or would it just consume them for fuel and move on? No one would have believed me if I told them what happened. So, I said it was a diving accident. I told them I tried to save Mike and Beth, and there wasn't anything I could do. A search party had turned up nothing, as I had expected. When I got back to the surface, I told my family I would never step foot in the sea again. They think it's because I'm remorseful. They think I just feel bad about Mike and Beth. But that's not it. I feel bad about them, sure, but what I really think about is what's down there under the surface. I saw how fast that thing consumed them. I think about the transatlantic garbage patch and how that was the big problem for a while. I think we may have a new problem now. Part 2. As I am sitting here thinking back, I really was happy living with a lot of kids my age. I was a happy boy who loved playing with all of my other brothers, not realizing the fact that I, as an orphan, was abandoned by my real parents and delivered to the orphanage. The people who worked at the orphanage gave us enough love to never feel lonely and filled the void that my parents had created. I had a particularly best friend whose name was Alex. We slept in different rooms, but we did everything together. The caregivers at the orphanage always joked about us secretly being brothers, and I felt the same way. Those really were happy days without worry. How I wish they would have lasted. I still remember the fire. The warmth that started as a caring embrace as I was sleeping soundly in my room quickly made it feel like I was in a sauna. That's when the screams started. Horrifying screams filled my blissful dreams, turning them dark and twisted. I woke up with a shriek as one of the kids whom I shared the room with had started shaking me. We all looked at each other with a terrified expression, not knowing what to do. That's when one of the supervisors in a hurry opened the door. With sweat running down his face and a panicked look, shouted that we needed to hurry and follow him. We ran down the hall to the door that would lead us outside. As I was running, I could see all the other doors open and the other kids running towards the door. As I got outside, I was met with a crowd of other kids all crying while looking at the burning building. Firefighters had already arrived and were trying to extinguish the fire to no avail. The fire had spread too much and could not be stopped. I suddenly got hit with a feeling of loss and tears started running down my face. At that time, I did not understand why I was crying, but I had not yet realized what I had really lost. I turned around looking for Alex. And when I couldn't see him in the crowd of kids, I started panicking. I tried desperately to find him among the others. And as I was just about to give up the search for him, I saw him standing alone away from the others. I hurried over to him to express my happiness that he made it out safely. But he just stood there with an emotionless look, staring at the burning building. I had no time to talk to him as one of the supervisors yelled to gather so they could count everyone. We remained at that place until the fire had almost burned out. 2 buses came to pick us up and drive us to the city where they would deliver us to various families who volunteered to take in some kids in light of this unpredicted emergency. Before we all split and went to the various families, the supervisors delivered a sad message. One of the kids had not made it out. No one had woken him before it was too late. I did not hear his name, but I looked over at Alex, who did not seem to have a reaction about the sad news either. A lot of the supervisors came over and hugged me with tears in their eyes and saying, "It will be okay." I was really lucky that I and Alex would go together to live with the same family, which actually made me very excited. Apparently, the family of 2 consisting of a husband and wife had a son who about a year ago had disappeared and was never seen again. So, they had a spare bedroom that they never used. When our new parents came to pick me and Alex up, they both had a very kind look on their face as they greeted us with open arms. If only that kind look on their faces had remained. As soon as we walked in the front door, we were led into a room that looked more like a dungeon from a movie than a bedroom. The room was very dark, only lit by red lights, making it almost impossible to see the whole room. Thick blankets had been bolted to the window, so no light would ever reach the walls of the inside. There were no beds. The only piece of furniture was a small metal table filled with knives, scissors, and other kinds of tools. And the smell, oh, it smelled like something had died there and was just left to rot. Of course, I got worried when what I expected to be a comfy bedroom for Alex and me to stay in turned out to be a room from the most twisted of horror movies, smelling so horrible that it almost made me want to vomit. But I was only a kid, and I chose to stay positive and believe they only meant the best for the 2 of us. Otherwise, why would they have been so kind as to take us in when we were in need of a place to stay? The belief I had in them was quickly drowned by the excruciating pain they made me go through. We were put in handcuffs and with the most despicable look on her face, my new mother told me she would cut me into pieces if I so much as made a sound. And with that, she closed the door to the room. I did not understand the situation and looked over at Alex, who sat with a kind of reassuring smile on his face. I looked over to the corner next to me and there laid a blanket covering something. I could easily detect that the smell came from there. When I lifted the blanket, it made sense why the room smelled so horrible. A bloody torn body of someone not very old lay right next to me. And as I saw the horrible sight before me, I passed out. I know now that the bloody, rotten corpse belonged to their real son, who had given into their despicable abuse and passed away. Apparently, they had covered up their devilish acts by making it seem like he had been kidnapped or run away, never to return. Those years were literal hell. I did not have it as tough as Alex did, though. At least they gave me food, even though it was completely rotten. It took some days before my stomach had gotten used to it and I stopped throwing up the rotten food. They must have fed Alex while I was sleeping because he never looked hungry. We always feared when the door would open and a new fist would greet our already beat up faces. They did a lot of unspeakable things to us that sometimes made me wish I would just perish. Even when they weren't in the room, they still haunted my dreams. The scariest part is that if you saw them walking on the streets, you would probably think they were just an ordinary sweet couple. But they showed us their real side. their twisted faces overflowing with pleasure every time I was caught because of a fist in the stomach or seeing my hopeless face filled with terror as they prepared their own homemade devices made to torture us. As horrible as it may sound, I was really relieved that I wasn't alone in that hell. Alex was strong. He never cried, and he would always lift my spirit with his smiles. He had always been very talkative, so at nights before we both fell asleep, we would talk about the outside world and how we would both like to visit a lot of different countries. He really saved me from going insane. When I turned 16, the police finally stormed into the room and saw the horror that we had endured for so many years. The Office of Child Affairs had started to suspect the couple when they had not allowed anyone to see us for so long. They faced a lifetime in prison. And for the first time in so long, smelling the fresh air, we walked into the sunlight as free boys. Food had never tasted this good, and Alex and I ate until we were completely full. The memories of that horrible place haunted me for many years. Even though my new parents were the nicest people on earth, Alex really helped me cope with everything. He was always there for me. As I started going to school, I made a lot of new friends, and I would always go home and tell Alex about all the funny things that happened in school. I met the love of my life in that same school and I moved in with her when I turned 21. I was really happy, but I started talking to Alex less and less. It had been 5 years since I talked to him last. I really miss him, and I hope to meet him again one day, but I think I have always known why I cried that day when the orphanage burned down. My mind couldn't comprehend losing the one thing that I loved more than anything in the world. Alex was there for me through all of my hard experiences, keeping me sane until I was ready to let go. I could finally remember the name of the boy who died in the fire. His name was Alex. Part 3. One evening when I was 9, I saw a man sitting on his balcony in the building across the street staring directly towards my window. Since then, I have been scared of people staring through my window. So, I usually kept my blinds down at night. One night, a few years after that, I was lying in bed trying to sleep. I noticed the rays of moonlight coming through the blinds were suddenly blocked by something. I looked over to the window and saw the silhouette of a tall man standing on my balcony behind the blinds of my window. I lived on the 4th floor, so how did he get to my balcony? And why was he standing there motionless? My brother and I shared a room, so he saw me staring at the window and asked what was wrong. I asked him if he saw the silhouette on the balcony, and he said that it's probably nothing and that I should just go to sleep. The next day, I lifted up the blinds to only cover half the window, but this time I didn't see anything before going to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom. When I came back, I noticed a man wearing a trench coat standing on the balcony in the same place as the previous night. The blinds were just low enough to cover his face. I stood there terrified for a few seconds and then ran up to my brother's bed and tried to wake him up. Wake up, wake up, he's back. He was half asleep and mumbled, "Ah, go to sleep already. It's late. Please, I'm not kidding. He's real. He's standing right there." He sat up and froze in place and then quietly whispered, "Oh my God, how did he get there? I'm not sure, but we need to tell Mom and Dad." Then the man walked over to the balcony door and started aggressively twisting the handle and pushing it with his shoulder, but thankfully the door was locked. My brother's face turned pale and he passed out. I asked if he was okay, but he didn't respond. When I looked back towards the balcony, the man was gone. I haven't seen him in a long time after that, and I thought he had left me alone. My brother also says it hasn't happened to him again, and that we were probably just imagining things because we were just scared kids. A few years ago, I finally moved out of my parents' apartment and got my own 2-floor house. And recently I have started seeing him again when the blinds are low enough to cover his face, but I usually just ignore him now since I always lock all doors and windows and he doesn't seem to do much. One night I was trying to sleep, but then I got hungry so I got up and went to the kitchen. When I got there, he was standing outside of the window, but there was no balcony there and nothing for him to stand on. I have tried to lift up the blinds before to see his face, but every time I try to do it when he's there, they wouldn't budge. So, This time I decided to try opening the window instead. I started slowly opening it and then tried peeking through to see him, but his hand reached out and grabbed me by the face, covering my eyes, and then pulled me out of the window. And the last thing I remember is falling towards the ground. The next day, I woke up on the grass in my backyard, right under the window that he pulled me out of. I tried coming back in, but all the doors and windows were locked, and all the blinds were pulled all the way down, except the window of my bedroom. He was standing there looking at me like he usually does, but for the first time, he was the one on the inside. I didn't know what to do, so I just decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Then, I noticed it wasn't just my house. Every single house had its blinds down and the curtains closed. And in each one, the people who lived in the houses were standing behind the half-covered windows. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they were looking at me. It started raining, and I headed back to my home. Thankfully, I forgot to take my coat inside and had left it on the front porch. I put it on and continued walking around the town. Everywhere I looked, it was all the same. No cars on the road or people on the streets. Just people standing by their windows with their faces hidden by the blinds. I tried ringing doorbells and knocking on doors and windows and even trying to open doors in case any of them were unlocked. I was stuck outside for hours and it was starting to get dark. The moon was full and it was a beautiful rainy evening and everything felt so calm despite how strange it was. Eventually, I managed to find a window with the blinds pulled halfway down, but there wasn't any person there. It was on the second floor, and I had to use the emergency stairs to get to it. The blinds were pulled down to my neck. I would have bent down to get a better look, but I had back pain from the fall and my legs hurt from walking all day. So, I just looked through the holes in the blinds instead. I saw someone sleeping on the bed inside of the apartment. Finally, a person who wasn't motionlessly standing by the window. I knocked on the window to wake him up. He sat up and stared at me with a scared expression. I didn't realize how creepy I looked. He got out of bed and went to turn the light on. I decided not to scare him, so I went back down and started thinking of what I should do. I didn't want to do it, but seems like the only way to escape this is to pull someone else into it. I got back up and saw that he was trying to sleep again. The poor guy probably thought I was an illusion from sleep deprivation. I started knocking on the window again and he immediately sat up and looked at me with a terrified expression. I tried speaking but the sound of the rain and wind muffled my voice, so I just continued knocking. He very hesitantly walked towards the window. I got closer to the blinds so that he couldn't see me by bending down, so he would have to open the window. He fruitlessly tried to pull the blinds up. After a lot of hesitation, he started slowly opening the window. I hated what I had to do, but I did it anyway. As he slowly opened the window and tried peeking around it, I grabbed him by the neck and used all the strength I had to pull him out and throw him onto the street. Then I climbed through the window and shut it. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, fearing that it may not have worked. But when I opened them, I was so happy to see the cars driving outside. I almost started crying. It felt like I was stuck in there for days. I can't imagine what it was like for the other guy to be stuck there for years. I exited the person's apartment and when I got back home, I pulled my blinds up and have kept them up since then. I hope whoever I pulled in wasn't in there for too long. Hopefully, one day I can forget this ever happened. But I don't think I will. Part 4. When people ask me at parties, I tell them I work in HR for an accounting firm or that my corner office has some bland nonsense title like managing consultant congealed to this glass in black lettering. They stop asking questions pretty quickly. When you pull out your card and cover their whole tab, curiosity peaks a little again, but soon gets washed over with inebriation. They wake up in the morning and if their wife or lover asks them what it is I do, they just say something in like administration, I think, and that's it. Plainness can hide all sorts of eccentricity. Can you think of anything plainer than the American Hops Museum? Even its boxy white form sitting squat in the town of Yakima, Washington yields little to hold your attention. The whole building is dedicated to the no doubt fascinating history of the cultivation of hops in the American Northwest. Can you tell your strigs from your bracts from your brack? Eager to learn about how the rich volcanic soil of the Yakima Valley has made it to the ideal environment for hop growing. Yeah, one mention of the Hop Museum in the back of your dad's sweltering summer road trip RV and you'll be screaming to see the largest ball of twine in the Cascadia region. But plainness hides strangeness. Secrets are contained in the things that your eyes pass and glaze over. Just down the hall from the statue of Charles Caper, the first to promote commercials of the hop growing east of the Cascades, lies a vending machine. It has Coke and Pepsi and everything you expect, with the only oddity that might catch someone's eye being as the machine had clearly not been replaced since the 70s, as Pepsi still bears its cold chunky logo. But if you grab the machine at the back in just the right spot and pull, it'll swing back from the wall as light as a feather. And behind it, you'll find a featureless wooden door. If you were to go to all this trouble, you'd be the only person to see my handiwork besides the clients it's made for. If you looked at the blueprints for the American Hops Museum, should you be for some reason so inclined, you would notice that laws of physics remaining intact, the door ought to lead you to a spot in the parking lot. But if you went ahead and opened the door, you would in fact find a luxury hotel room, or so I've been told. The furnishing of these impossible spaces is usually not part of your contract. I make the space between spaces, the rooms that should not be, and you figure out the Craigslist couch or BDSM equipment as you see fit. This is the work of a crypto architect. We often regard the founder of our field as Sarah Winchester. Her face adorns the first poorly mimeographed page of the Excellence in Cryptography correspondence courses that introduces one to the field. If you have heard of the legendary Winchester Mystery House, you probably know her story. Or at least you think you do. Supposedly, she was haunted by the ghosts of all those killed by her husband's anonymous firearms that she spent years pouring her fortune into a nonsensical house to appease or escape them. Doors that open to brick walls, stairs that go nowhere, rooms no bigger than a few inches wide. The whole labyrinth had become a tidy little tourist attraction. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. See, Mrs. Winchester lived at the time when folks scoffed at the thought of a woman becoming an architect. Hell, in some of the big firms, you'll still get a couple of derisive snorts if they see someone with 2 X chromosomes mucking around with floor plans and blueprints. So Sarah, discovering something within herself, pioneered our art of making rooms that should not be. Contemporary reports will indicate that the Winchester home remained to all casual observers, the small farmhouse that Sarah had initially purchased. A far cry from the 4 stories, 40 bedrooms, 17 chimney monstrosity that is now a modern attraction. So why now does the building seem to reside in documented and bizarre physical shape attested to by tens of thousands of tourists? Well, one thing that keeps crypto constructs safe is precisely their impossibility. The ordinary mind, unconditioned to encounter such illogical spaces, will often crack under the pressure and instinctively flee the room while blocking any memory of it having existed. This would be what we might think of as a best-case scenario. A more troublesome contingency is what we in the business call a fly trap. The intruder becomes convinced that the simultaneous feelings of strangeness and familiarity engendered by our spaces make them the only safe place left in a mad outside world. So, your wealthy senator client brings his smoke show young mistress to the secret room on floor 8.5 of the 60-story downtown hotel and finds not an amorous love nest, but the emaciated corpse of some poor refugee from sanity. It kills the mood and leads to a hell of a customer service complaint. But on rare occasions that crypto constructs are passed through by thousands, like the tourist trap that is the Winchester Mystery House, the psychic weight of so many minds puzzling over the same space will eventually massage it into something real and physical. But once you're skilled and smart enough to avoid pitfalls, it ain't a bad little industry. Raunchy secret liaison of the wealthy and powerful tend to be my stock in trade. The family values state senator that likes to take his boy toys in the room behind the vending machine in the Hops Museum just got me a nice new beachfront property. Secrecy will always be at a premium, and secrecy paid off my student loans for my naive abortive attempt to break into the architectural world of the more usual variety. What can I say? I have unusual skill in high demand, and I've always dreamed of making kill a guy and get away with community service money. And then one day, Opportunity came knocking. I got an email from a friend of mine in the industry, saying he had just gotten off this incredible job. Easy. Shouldn't take more than a few hours and it was guaranteed big money. So, of course, I jumped at the opportunity because I'm nothing if not hungry for a quick buck. He told me he would send them my resume and information and someone should be in touch shortly. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Egyptian Embassy, Los Angeles. Tell them that you're with the Department of Hack. Bathroom cubicle second from right in upstairs office. 8 feet high, 3 feet wide. Length is up to you. Bare concrete, single bowl, $3 million to complete in 24 hours. I gave my aforementioned acquaintance a quick call to make sure this all sounded right, and he enthusiastically confirmed that everything sounded in order. He sounded a little stunned at the fact I had been offered a sum twice what he had received for the job. But his voice also contained a note of excitement. In our tight-knit little industry, any notes of cutthroat competition were dulled by the feeling that we were all pioneers in some strange new art form. The fact that none of us were exactly starving artists helped some. The journey from my home in the Puget Sound area to LA was a fairly uneventful one. Only a sense of paranoia that thrummed in the back of my mind made me occasionally pick out inconspicuous-looking people I suspected of glancing at me a little bit too long. My friend had suggested and all evidence seemed to indicate that this was a secretive government job of some kind. Maybe I had just been watching too many 70s spy thrillers, but I kept looking over my shoulder until I got to the embassy. The building was quiet, and as I walked in, I suddenly wondered what it was exactly an embassy did from day to day, having never been inside one. Crazy hand-to-hand combat like in the Bourne movies. As far as I knew, it could very well be the case. But the drab bureaucratic building was about to see at least a little bit of excitement today, I thought as I strode up to the counter with my briefcase and neatly pressed suit. I gave my name and the sweet-looking old lady at the desk blinked in the befulement before I added, Homeland Security, and she beamed, gesturing me to a set of stairs behind her desk. I found my way to upstairs bathroom without a problem and feigned a little stage fright at the urinal before the rotunded Arab man occupying my workspace had left. As I entered the cubicle, I gagged and muttered some derogatory comment about his diet. I held my breath as I fumbled around the back of the cistern, calming my mind and envisioning a door opening in the white tiled wall in front of me. Eventually, my grasping found the imperfection that would act as a key. A tiny chip in the back of the cistern. I pressed my finger, squeezing the flesh into the tiny space and turned it counterclockwise 3 times, visualizing a key turning in a door. Just like that, I was stumbling back as the toilet slid towards me, taking 5 feet of wall with it and leaving a gap to slip behind. All in all, forming the little room took 2 to 3 hours. The minute dimensions and bare features made it easy enough, and it only took a little massaging and concentrating to get done, but the light bulb was the real trouble. As previously mentioned, I usually tend to leave furnishing to the client themselves. And as for more complex systems like wiring and plumbing, those were definitely a no-go, without specialist knowledge. Making U-bends and earth lines out of sheer thought forms tended to go drastically wrong. I sent a message to my client's number informing them the space was prepared, but lighting would have to be done by someone else. I received a true reply, "Get it done." At a loss, I reached out to a contact of mine in LA. I kept tradesmen that I knew that could keep their mouths shut on hand in a few major cities for just this eventuality. After some confusion at the front desk, I brought my wire-bearing savior into the cubicle and squeezed my eyes tight, twisting at the chip in the back of the cistern. As the wall slid, backlight spilled the color of jaundice onto the tiling. I crouched into the room in confusion. There was now a single light bulb dangling from the ceiling of the concrete den. But it was its companion casting shivering shadows on the walls that made my heart rise to my throat. A pair of manacles suspended by chains from the roof embedded in the concrete. It appeared the furnishing had already begun. As the electrician began to fire questions my way, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it in the dark and the light bounced off the shaking chains. Asset compromised. Our professional relationship is terminated. Consequences to follow. I caught the last plane back to Seattle just as soon as I could, drinking 3 or 4 Jack and Cokes to calm my nerves. I should have been angry about the broken contract, but the only emotion my fiery gut could summon was pure animal fear. I tried every way I knew how to contact the acquaintance that had put me onto this job in the first place, but all I could get was his voicemail. Eventually, even that was gone, replaced by a dead click and eventually one of those robot voice out of service notifications. I haven't left my house in a week or so. At night, I dream of that little room behind the cubicle in the embassy. A shadowy figure hangs there, and I can see his heartbeat through his chest. I pace the floor of my apartment, desperately begging it to expand. I feel like I can't breathe in here. I tried my front door today, and it wouldn't budge in the slightest, as though something were blocking. I damn near broke my shoulder, ramming the damn thing, but it would not budge, despite the fact that it was clearly unlocked. Mind racing, I decided instead to pull, yanking at the silvery handle with all my might. Cold sweat down my back. Eventually, the top of the door separated enough from its frame that I was able to yank at it with my fingernails, peeling it back ever so slightly, like I was peeking into a box of Tupperware. Beyond it, I saw a slab of dense concrete wall. My windows will be the next to go. Crypto architecture is a truly amazing industry. To change and conjure spaces, all you need is a defined, unbroken string of thought. Your mind can get lost in a trance, building and reshaping things unconsciously as its forefront is otherwise occupied. You can hypnotize yourself with a racing series of thoughts like a good tale, unaware of your world shifting imperceptibly around you. By the way, when was the last time you pulled your eyes away from the screen? Does something seem off about the familiar place that you're huddled up in right now? Plainness can hide all sorts of stranges. You might want to try your nearest doorway. Part 5. Eat it. Charlotte pushed Marina's face closer to the fly-infested dog turd. Eat it and be grateful. My daddy saw your daddy at the soup kitchen, so you must be hungry. A cacophony of giggles erupted behind Charlotte. A gaggle of pig-tailed, ponytailed, and bob-cuted brats from hell. You're hurting me, Marina cried. Please, just let me go. Strands of her flowing brown hair were beginning to touch the droppings. Enough, Charlotte, I shouted. Leave her alone or I'll tell the teacher. Charlotte turned her head towards me in a slow, calculated manner. Oh, look who it is. P-boy Carlos, she pointed, her gang bellowing out on cue. Did you run out of pants to pee in yet? That was 3 years ago. We were in 2nd grade. You want to know what my daddy said about you? She took a step towards me, blonde pigtails bouncing as she moved. He said your mommy didn't just skip town. He said your daddy killed her. Stop it. That's not true. I took a step backward. He said your daddy got mad 'cause your mommy was sleeping with every man in town. He said that your daddy doesn't even know if you're his kid. Her next step sent me stumbling backward, tripping over Marina. My skull smacked against the asphalt. The group roared with laughter, joined by a new voice. Marina's. Ew. Charlotte giggled. I knew you were full of piss. I guess you're full of crap now, too. The crowd went wild. The sudden blare of the school bell caused the herd to break apart and head towards the building, leaving me to tend to my wounds. My ears were still ringing from the knock to my head when I first heard her. Bring her to me. The woman's voice turned my blood into ice. It was a low, guttural whisper echoing from the tunnel at the far end of the playground, 50 yards away. I pushed myself up and turned towards my caller. She was wiry, so thin that it looked as if a weak gust of wind would snap her in half. Her skin was gray and sagged as if it was about to fall off. With her right hand, she beckoned towards me once more. Her voice sounded like it was emanating from all around me. Bring her to me. I wanted to run, but my legs betrayed me. My feet were glued to the ground. Tears began to flow down my face. Just as she was about to speak again, my bladder released. Carlos. I turned, snapped out of the trance by my teacher's sharp voice. Recess is over. Get over here now. My goodness, did you wet yourself again? I'm going to have to call your father. The class clapped and laughed from the window as if I had given them some sort of encore. We can't keep doing this. My father kept his eye on the road as he spoke. Dad, it was an accident. I saw some. I know it was an accident, boy, but you can't keep having them. You'll be starting middle school next year. I know, Dad, I didn't mean to. I saw some. No one ever means to mess their pants. You just need to go to the bathroom more often. Sometimes you have to go, even if it doesn't feel like it. Do you understand? Dad, I'm trying to tell you that I understand. Yes, I understand. It was still early in the afternoon when we got home. My dad had to go back to work, so I was left alone. I took a quick shower, hopped on my bicycle, and rode back towards the tunnel. I wasn't sure who the woman was, but something inside me was burning to go back and see her. I parked my bike on the side of the tunnel, opposite the school. It was a large empty field with a few trees. No one was around except for a couple of teenagers throwing water balloons at cars. Hello. I used my hands as a makeshift megaphone from 10 yards away. Is anyone there? The dark skeletal figure began crawling down the tunnel, bouncing side to side. The woman's bony gray elbows jutted out towards the walls. Her knees were locked straight, forcing her into a misshapen triangle-like figure. She was giggling and humming as she wriggled forward. A sudden wave of chills poured over me, covering my body in goose flesh. I moved backward away from the tunnel. The woman seemed incensed by this and began moving faster. She started making a noise that sounded like she was rapidly licking and smacking her cracked, rotting lips. I turned to run, but was immediately pushed to the floor. What are you looking for, your mommy? It was one of the teenagers wearing a red shirt. You got to get out of here. I pushed myself up in desperation. Before you get hurt. Is that a threat, twerp? He shoved me down again, even harder. My sister has class with this kid. She says he pees his pants all the time. His sidekick snickered at the same time she spoke. Bring them to me. It sounded like she was inhaling as she called. Please, I yelled. Can't you hear her? We have to go. The only thing I hear is a little boy about to pee his pants. I stood up once more and was immediately dropped by a punch to the gut. I laid on the ground, helpless as a red shirt jumped on my bicycle and rode off. The sidekick launched a water balloon at me before running away, hitting me square in the crotch. When I looked towards the tunnel, the woman was gone. Somewhere in the depths, I heard a faint gurgling growl. I jumped up and raced towards home. The trip would take even longer without my bike. My dad's car was standing guard in the driveway when I arrived. He pushed the door open before I even reached the steps. Where the hell were you, Carlos? He yelled. You think today was some kind of reward that you could just run around town doing whatever you want? Dad, I'm sorry. Please, I need to tell you. I saw my God. Did you piss in your pants again twice in one day? Dad, no. Someone threw a water balloon and I a water balloon. You thought you had permission to go have a water balloon fight in the middle of a school day. Get to your room now. Dad, there was a now. I moped into my room and crawled under the blankets. I tossed and turned that night. Every creak in the floorboards and whistle of the wind caused my heart to race. At some point, the sweet release of sleep rescued me. I could hear the other kids whispering and giggling behind my back at school the next day. I flinched every time I rounded a corner. Hearing the final bell ring felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I stepped out of school, planning to take a long way home when Marina approached me. Hey, Carlos, she said. I'm sorry I laughed at you the other day. I was just trying to fit in. She started walking towards the playground. Oh, it's okay, I guess. I began to follow without realizing it. You know, Charlotte's not all that bad when you get to know her. She was just having fun. She started walking quicker. She kind of is. She's been bullying me since the second grade. I matched her pace. Well, either way, she came to an abrupt stop and turned to face me. I wanted to thank you for sticking up for me. She slowly began leaning her face towards mine. My heart started banging in my chest. She inched closer, eyes closed. I gradually leaned back, closed my eyes. Our lips were nearly touching, and then ew. Charlotte's voice shot through the air like a bullet. I told you he'd come if you told him to. Pee-pee boy has a crush on you. She laughed. Marina stepped away, covered her mouth, and giggled. I opened my eyes and realized we were mere feet from the tunnel. You really thought she was going to kiss you, didn't you? Charlotte laughed. I found another dog turd. This one is just for you. Marina and another girl grabbed me by the arms and held me in place as Charlotte moved toward me with a wet mess in her bare hands. Bring them to me. The voice sounded more potent now, more explicit than ever. I didn't hesitate this time. I swung my head to the side and cracked Marina in the nose, then pushed Charlotte's hand into her face. She screamed. Get him. I sprinted into the tunnel, the girls chasing not far behind. I was never the fastest runner in the class, not by a long shot, but the tunnel wasn't very long. I pushed myself forward with everything I had, but every one of their strides equaled two of mine. I could feel them gaining on me. My lungs began to hurt. I felt one of them graze the back of my shirt. I was almost at the exit. A hand pushed me by the shoulder, sending me crashing to the ground face first. I bundled into the fetal position and covered my face instinctively, bracing myself, and then nothing. I opened my eyes to see that I was lying in the field a few feet outside the exit. I stood and faced the tunnel, but it was empty. No Charlotte, no Marina, not even the gray woman. I was brought in for questioning by the police since I was the last person who saw the girls before they disappeared. I told them that we were playing a game. The girls were hiding and I was seeking. I told them the last place I saw the girls was the tunnel. The department closed the school and scoured the shaft. They found a single set of bones buried inside, my mother's. They still don't have any leads on who killed her or buried her there, but I think I have an idea. The school opened for summer classes today to make up for lost time. When my dad came to pick me up, a low, guttural growl poured from the tunnel. Bring him to me. Part 6. Working at a bakery always seemed like a very romantic job. It was the job of choice for many rom-com leading ladies, and romance always seemed to bloom from them with the smell of freshly baked bread in the background. Did I apply for this job because of that? Yes. But don't judge me for it. I'm not actually a baker, but I know my way around a kitchen, and I got hired on as Susan's assistant. At first, waking up at 4 a.m. to get to the bakery by 4:30 was torture, but my sleep schedule adapted, and the sunrises were beautiful to see. Eventually, I fell into routine, kneading dough and piping icing while the morning stars still twinkled outside. It was one of those things that even once you saw the reality of it, it was still fantastical. We made lavender loaves, wildflower cookies, thyme shortbread cookies, and anything else that struck Susan's fancy in the morning. I stuck around to help cashier and brew coffee for the early crowd, but I was usually out by 10 o'clock. It's a really dedicated early crowd, though, and the tips were nice. Sometimes it was cash, but some customers brought us things that they think that we would like. I have gotten wildflowers, shiny stones, vials of stream water, and fresh sunflower seeds placed in the tip jar. I took them all home and set them in my window sill. There was one weird thing, though. I wasn't allowed to tell anyone my name, and we didn't have name tags. Susan said it's because of a past situation where she had a cashier, Nicole, stalked by a crazy customer. And ever since then, she says not to share that much about ourselves with the customers. I had gotten good at shaking off the questions, but smiling and nodding can only get you so far in customer service. So, when Nathaniel came in one morning, I accidentally mentioned the neighborhood I lived in when it came up in conversation. He smiled, tipped his hat, and took his rosemary scone to go. I thought that was the end of it, but lately I had been hearing weird things outside my windows at night. Scratchings, kind of. It sounded like what a tree branch scraping on your window would sound like, except there are no trees close to my windows. Regardless, I still came to work every day. Nathaniel has become a regular now. He stays to sip his tea and watch me as I work. It was a little uncomfortable, but kind of flattering. You'd understand if you saw Nathaniel. He's, well, there's no other word for it than beautiful. His long, dark locks of hair hang easily on his shoulders, and his green eyes seem to shine brighter as the day goes on. His freckles seem to almost dance across the bridge of his nose. That's cheesy, isn't it? I can't help it. He's just ethereal. Good morning, miss, he said, startling me as I was rearranging the loaves in the window. Good morning, Nathaniel, I smiled. Would you like a refill on tea? He grinned and handed his teacup to me, brushing my hand. His hands were surprisingly smooth. It doesn't seem as if he had ever had a hard day's work in his life. I turned to boil some more water for him and set his teacup on the counter. He was still standing there watching me. I suddenly wished the water would boil faster. I could feel my pulse quickening. It's just so hard to have small talk with customers when you can't say anything about yourself. Maybe that's why I was so nervous. It's a beautiful morning out, isn't it? I said. Oh, yes. He smiled. He knew he had me until the water boiled. I had a wonderful walk here this morning. The morning dew was always such a nice morning surprise, sweet like honey. I couldn't decide if he was just especially pretentious or if he was genuinely someone who drank morning dew. I had had some customers mention it to me before. Maybe it was just something that people did. I personally prefer real honey in my tea, but that's just because I see what my neighbor's dog does to that sweet morning dew. The water seemed to be taking longer than normal to boil. Had I even turned it on? So, he continued, what do you do in your free time away from here? Oh, this and that, I said, fumbling with the cord. It had somehow fallen away from the wall. Susan came out from the kitchen, still covered in a snow dusting of flour. Her eyes were quick and settled on Nathaniel, leaning carelessly against the counter, and me scrambling under the table with the plug. I'll get some water boiling in the kitchen. Why don't you come with me? She said to me, more of a command than anything. She filled up an iron saucepan with water and put it on the stove. Quick and dirty, but it'll do the job. Are you being careful, Callie? She said, leaning an elbow against the counter. You know how important it is for you to follow the rules here. I was baffled. Was I being reamed out about forgetting the plug on the electric tea kettle? Surely she knew it had been a mistake. Sometimes I'm a little slow to things, but she knew I had been trying my best. Yes, of course. I'm sorry about the kettle. I don't know how. I mean, are you being careful about yourself? She cuts me off. We have a very loyal clientele. Fine folks, but boundaries are important here. I knew that Nicole's disappearance had rattled her. It would be insane if it didn't. But that was just a one-time crazy incident. The stalker had been arrested and was in a maximum security psych unit. He had never said what happened to Nicole, but she seemed to have vanished without a trace. The police tried to find her, but it was as if she had fallen off the face of the planet. Her stalker was no help either. They interrogated him for days, but he just kept saying she had left to be with family. It was assumed she was dead. Sure, Nathaniel was a little weird in that eclectic artist way, but there was no way he was stalker murderer level weird. Just weird. Susan, I said softly. I'm being careful. I promise nothing is going to happen to me. I took the now boiling water and made Nathaniel's tea. I thought that was going to be the end of it. I really wished it had been. I wish I had listened to Susan. There was so much I didn't know. After that, Nathaniel didn't come around anymore. I started having trouble sleeping, though. I thought that waking up every morning so early meant I would sleep like a log at night, but the damn scratching kept me up so late. Work started to get weirder. Susan seemed more shy and the clientele seemed less friendly. They still lined up in droves for our scones and pastries, but they felt more like a collective swarm of angry wasps. The energy was frantic, even as they sipped their tea, staring at me from the tables. Complaints started to roll in about me. I wasn't friendly or wasn't customer service oriented. Customers bared their teeth as I forget to say please and thank you. I dodged personal questions without any care or regard for politeness. I could just never sleep. The scratching became so loud at night. I had barricaded myself under my bed. The windows rattled. Sleep seemed to be a thing of the past now. I felt like a zombie dragging myself into work in the morning. I had made my first mistake when I was boiling lingonberries for jam. I nodded off just for a second, but long enough to spill the jam and get a nasty burn on my hand. Susan sent me home for the day to rest and take care of myself. The bell tingled above me as I left out the front door to drive home. It was 6:30, which meant customers were getting ready to come in. I smiled and waved at the queue as I made my way to my car. Susan would be okay. She said she was going to call in some help to manage the register while I was out. I was distracted. I bumped into someone on the sidewalk and sent his to-go mug flying. It busted open on my chest and drenched me in dark coffee. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, scrambling for the mug. I was positively soaked. There was no amount of bleach that would get this out of my white sweater. "I'm so sorry," he said again. "Please, I have to insist that you let me pay for your dry cleaning. I won't take no for an answer." I was exhausted and not in the mood to argue. Besides, it was my favorite sweater. I tried to push the thought out of my head that technically it was my fault. Well, I guess it was. It felt like 1 second it was free and clear, and then the next second he had appeared out of nowhere. He had offered a pad of paper for me to put my information on. I wrote down my information, ignoring my aching, burned hand as I spelled out my name and contact information. He took it from me and smiled. "Excellent. I'll be in contact soon. Calliope." "Oh, it's just Callie." I frowned. There was no way I wrote out my actual name. I have always gone by Callie, but maybe he was just one of those weird, pretentious dudes. I waved as I went to my car, desperate to get home and lay my head down on my pillow. I glanced up as I put the car in reverse to back out. The man I had run into had gotten into line outside the bakery. He smiled wolfishly and raised his hand in a wave. "I should have known. You never give them your name." Heat, 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 heat.